Some who found themselves in the midst of the terror have relatives in the Twin Cities area. David Schechter reports on the ripple of fear that spread through one apartment in Brooklyn Center and the rest of Minnesota.
Well, I'm glad everything is fine. God, this is unbelievable.
Jawad Ben Garmica.
People are crazy. Yeah, I love you. Bye.
Had a close one.
Bye-bye. Crying. She's in shock. Yeah, she's going home to rest.
His sister, Amali, works in a deli across the street from the World Trade Center. Debris showered her sidewalk and trapped her in the store.
My first thing was like, oh my God, my sister.
In the Muslim culture, just before someone is about to die, they'll often say, I want to make peace with you. Well, that is exactly what Jawad's sister said to him on the phone this morning. She thought she was going to die.
She said, forgive me, brother, if I did something bad to you, She thought she was going to die.
But she's fine, unlike so many others. Just one more thing for Jawad to remember.
My God.
On a day that he and we will never forget. David Schechter, WCCO 4 News.
Jawad, who's Moroccan, says that his sister was almost immediately harassed because she's Arabic. And he, like many, urged caution in pointing fingers at people simply because of where they were born.
Air traffic controllers in Minnesota are on heightened alert tonight, a condition known as CCON Charlie. That means control crews are under FAA orders not to leave their radar screens or the facilities they work in until they are cleared to do so. One Minnesota air traffic controller we spoke with in Farmington tells us that although the crisis is placing extra stress on his fellow controllers, it pales in comparison to what their peers in New York experienced today.
I can't even imagine the trauma that the potential trauma that the controller is going through right now. A feeling of helplessness, disbelief, horror. Those would probably be the three adjectives that I would use. It's just sadness.
And one of the reasons for all of that, Craig Bainey says it's possible that New York air traffic controllers were aware that the planes that struck the World Trade Center towers were hijacked and tried to divert them, but that their attempts to communicate with the aircraft were ignored.
Prayer vigils are taking place all over the state tonight. Our team coverage continues at the Basilica of St. Mary. Rick Fuentes is there.
Amelia, believers of many faiths have come to St. Mary's for a special service. I don't want to try and compete with the service going on, but as you can see, it is a packed house. Not a seat is available right here, and people are still coming in. In fact, people here at the Basilica tell us that they've been busy all day, people coming in to reflect. This is a special service, a very unique. We've been enjoying some Hebrew psalms being read by visiting rabbis. Later, we will hear a homily read by Father Gillespie here of St. Mary's. And then we will hear a Jewish prayer for the dead before the end of the service. Many people, of course, gathering here to try and look for some answers on this very difficult day and to comfort each other on this day that a lot of people will not be able to forget. Reporting live in Minneapolis, I'm Rick Fuentes.
Thanks, Rick. A way you can help the people suffering out east is to give blood. The response has been overwhelming at the Memorial Blood Center of Minneapolis today. The line to give went out into the parking lot. Donors didn't mind standing in line for hours. Another way you can help is donate money to the American Red Cross. You can call our phone bank at 612-330-2764 to make your charge donation over the phone. These volunteers will be on hand all evening. They will also have information about where you can donate blood.
Lost in the horror of the terrorist attacks is the fact that this is a big primary election day in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. In the aftermath of the attacks, there was a downturn in turnout. But now the numbers of voters are picking back up, and Esme Murphy joins us with the latest.
Well, as you can probably tell behind me, turnout at this precinct and precincts across Minneapolis and St. Paul is actually picking up. It's important to remember that polling places in Minneapolis and St. Paul are open until 8 o'clock. At first, many local voters seemed paralyzed by the horrible news from the East Coast. But many voters we spoke with say they were inspired by today's terrible events to come out and exercise their right to vote. At this Highland Park polling place in St. Paul, workers like everyone else were riveted by the horror.
One might presume that they are flying combat air patrol over Manhattan.
Many voters told us the attacks made them more determined.
It's a reminder what happened today of how important freedom is and how important the vote is for people to take the liberties seriously.
Even before the East Coast terrorist attacks, the voter projections for turnout for both Minneapolis and St. Paul is that there'd be very few voters casting ballots, that there'd be about 40,000 people casting ballots in Minneapolis, maybe as few as 30,000 in St. Paul. Turnout before the disaster was brisk. Among those voting early, Minneapolis mayoral candidates R.T. Ryback and Lisa McDonald. And in St. Paul, mayoral candidates Jay Beninoff and Randy Kelly. But then, at mid-morning, in the aftermath of the crisis, voting slowed. Mayor Sharon Sells Belton, voting at midday, urged everyone to get out and still cast their ballot.
In the city of Minneapolis and elsewhere across the country, we're going to maintain our calm, and we're going to conduct the nation's business.
And as people started trickling back to the polls, many expressed an emotional commitment to vote.
This is my way of saying, I'm an American. I want to do what's right for my country.
Our country is a melting pot based on, a wonderful democracy. I can't say how proud I am.
Obviously, many voters very emotional in the wake of the terrible events, but clearly our democratic process is continuing. It is not clear right now how today's events will affect the outcome of this election and also the turnout, which is considered critical to that outcome. Reporting live from Bryn Mawr Elementary, I'm Esme Murphy.
Today's news extends beyond urban centers, goes throughout the country, of course. As Joe Kurkowski from our sister station KCCO in Alexandria tells us, rural Minnesota is equally shocked.
As the world reacts to today's attack on America, rural Minnesota is also feeling the pain. In Alexandria this morning, businesses and classes stood still as the day's events unfolded in front of them. Students and their teachers tried to put it all into perspective.
So it is a heck of a lot worse in Oklahoma.
Across town, the mother of two daughters on the East Coast, one in New York, the other in Washington, D.C., tried to remain calm.
When we took Laura to school about a month ago, I did have the thought that I now have my two daughters in probably the two most powerful and vulnerable cities in the world.
Miles away, across the river from the Pentagon, Laura watched history being made safe and sound on the campus of Georgetown University.
The scariest part about all this is that we're directly in the flight line of where the plane had to have flown in from, so it appears that the plane would have had to fly right over our campus.
Many churches in greater Minnesota have prayer services planned for tonight. This afternoon, Alexandria's faith community gathered to plan an ecumenical service for later this week to pray for peace, not only on the East Coast, but all over our nation. In Alexandria, Joe Kurkowski, WCCO News.
Joe says a viewer from Bemidji asked the question, what number do you call in an emergency? 911? And he followed with what is today's date? 9/11. He says it's something to think about.